Hello again and welcome to our latest update, this time covering figures for the month of March 2014. During the month of March there were 2.4 million visits from overseas to the United Kingdom. That was a 10% increase on a year ago. However, we've not quite matched the record levels for March seen back in 2007 and 2008. As we've seen across a number of recent months, it was, however, a record for how much those visits generated, with £1.34 billion worth of spending, up 3% in nominal terms compared with March of last year. That's the hors d'oeuvre, but what about the main course? We now have full year headlines for 2013, so what can we say about last year? Well, we can say that it was a record year for how much visitors spent here, just more than £21 billion. That's up almost 13%. It was also a record year for how many visits actually took place, at 32.8 million, 5.6% higher than the year before. As you might be able to figure out, this means that how much was spent per visit increased last year from £600 to £640. It was also good news that holiday visitors came in record numbers and also spent a record amount here in the country. Air is still the mode of travel used by the majority of visitors. However, it was a record year in terms of how many overseas visitors chose to come to Britain through the Channel Tunnel. The difference between how much is spent here by overseas visitors and how much Brits spend when they're abroad is called our International Tourism Balance of Payments Deficit, and in real terms it was at its lowest level since 1998 in 2013. What were the top markets then in 2013? Let's start by looking in terms of value. While by a country mile it's still the US that is our most valuable source market, with spending of about £2.5 billion last year. Germany moved back into second place from France, with those two countries having swapped places, and Australia remains our fourth most valuable market, with spending well over £1 billion. There might only be 5 or 6 million people living in Norway, but we can see that thanks to a high volume of visits, Norway is firmly in the top 10 when it comes to spend. The league table for volume of visits looks slightly different. We see that at just more than 3.9 million visits, it's France that leads the way, ahead of Germany in second place and the US in third spot. This is the first year in history where all top 10 markets have generated more than 1 million visits. What about the BRIC markets, Brazil, Russia, India and China? Let's start by looking at how much visitors from those markets spent here last year. And China is now Britain's 13th most valuable source market, thanks to a really strong increase in spending during last year, taking the tally to very nearly £500 million. If we look at the volume league table, we can see it's rather different, and China is still only our 30th most sizable market with 196,000 visits, whereas India tops the league table for the BRICS with 375,000 visits, placing it in 17th spot. We saw earlier that it was a record year for holiday visits and for holiday spend, and the really good news is that these benefits were spread right across the country, with holiday spend up by 27% in Wales, up by a fifth in Scotland, 15% in London, and by 5% in other parts of England outside of London. You can find a huge amount more on both the monthly and the annual data by looking at our website. Next time we will cover provisional figures for the month of April, and we'll also look at UNWTO figures for top global destinations in 2013. So until then, bye-bye.